Welcome to the course Introduction to Urban Planning. In this session today, in our effort to contextualize our cities and to review their emplotment and to see how did we reach here where we see such giant cities, we will walk through the narratives of post-industrialization urban changes. We will look at the end of the 19th century, the period of modern ideas of cities and the city life. About theories we learn, key references for our session is Professor Jason Lugar's lecture from University of Berkeley, and simultaneously we will map our Indian landscape. We saw in past lectures, we explored the guiding factors, how we placed and organized our cities. We saw many innovations in cities, which we still continue to adopt in our urban planning approach. We learned about so many aspects by reviewing the emplotment of the cities. So the coverage of today's lecture will include, we will retrospect the industrial period and we'll look at how people from different disciplines deciphered cities. We will look at the key work and observations we'll look at Charles Dicken's work, we'll look at John Snow's work, Charles Booth's work, as well as we'll look at Jacob Riis' photography. We'll also look at Haussman's work, as well as we will look at the urban reforms which resulted after their interventions. We'll look at key movement and theories such as city beautiful, garden cities, and suburbs culture. Further, we will look at the key interventions and investment in infrastructure and how they influenced our life socially and economically. We will also look at the key movement from Frank Lloyd Wright to Le-Corbusier, Bauhaus school, and Walter Benjamin's theories. We will see the origin of planning discipline. We will also review the planning approach. We'll look at what issues were there in the planning which we adopted and the social context in Western world, and at the same time we'll look at the Indian context. So accordingly, the expected learning outcomes include that after completion of the session, you should be able to review the industrial period, you should be able to identify the key work and observations of Charles Dicken, John Snow, Charles Booth, Jacob Riis, Haussman, and you should be able to discuss about the following urban reforms and simultaneously review our Indian landscape. Further, you should be able to explain the key movement and theories, including city beautiful, garden cities, and suburbs, and should be able to narrate their examples. You should be able to review the key urban trends, inventions, and investment in infrastructure of the time and their implications in our urban pattern. You should be able to discuss the key movement of Frank Lloyd Wright, Le-Corbusier, Bauhaus school, Walter Benjamin's thoughts with respect to the context in which they came. You should be able to describe the origin of planning discipline. You should be able to review the planning approach, issues in planning and social context, and compare with India in global context. We saw in the previous class that the industrial city was dirty and chaotic. And by mid-19th century, urban thinkers such as Marx, Engels, Dickens, and John Snow began to highlight the problems of modern city through their research. The period was unstable. Tensions were creating. We saw transformation and saw new groups forming of urban poor and urban elite. Inequality was massive and gave rise to anger and uprising and leading to urban wars, which was going to come in 20th century. This was also an important time for planning. We saw new methods in urban ethnography which highlighted the urban problems and indicated the solutions for application. We see that John Snow used mapping to find the source of cholera, which we will also see in our discussion in public health and urban planning series as well. In 1854, there was a massive cholera outbreak in Soho, London. In 3 days, over 120 people died from the disease. John Snow plotted the locations of the deaths on a map and found they clustered around a pump in Broad Street. He suggested that the pump be taken out of service, thus helping to end the pandemic. This then helped him to formulate his theory of spread of cholera by dirty water. This analysis is famous as it is often considered to be the first epidemiological analysis of the disease, trying to understand the spread of the cases by factors in the environment. The first geographical analysis of disease data, plotting points on map and looking for relationships. Cholera was just one of many public health concerns in the industrial city. John Snow found, using mapping techniques, that cholera came from infected water in specific wells. In 1854, you can see in the map the pump shown in blue on the map, and the red circles with varying sizes indicate the number of deaths. This was an example of urban planning, mapping, qualitative research, and public health all coming together. We also see Charles Booth, a great and good English Victorian. He was deeply concerned by contemporary social problems, and without any instructions, he planned, organized, and funded one of the most comprehensive and scientific social surveys of London's life that had been undertaken in 1889. His map was called Poverty Map. This was an early example of social cartography. Each street is colored to indicate the income and social class of its inhabitants. You may take note of the legend used and the color code used to capture the social conditions in London. Because of the efforts of the urban reformers like Charles Booth, the understanding increased regarding the planning had a huge role to play in the modern city in improving living conditions for the urban poor as well as for the wealthy. Following this, public housing, which was also aesthetically appealing and containing modern technologies such as water and electricity, became an important aspect of modern planning. In this image, we see the Boundary Estate, first public housing known as social housing in the UK, in London, came up in 1900. We also see the photography of Jacob August Riis, who was newspaper reporter, social reformer, and photographer. In his book, How the Other Half Lives, published in 1890, shook the conscience of readers with factual description of slums condition in the New York City. The photograph made impossible to ignore the urban problems. Thus, the innovations like public housing, improved sanitation, and formal planning bodies emerged. There were also new ideas of how cities could and should be beautiful, a response to ugliness and chaos of the industrial landscape. As per Britannica documentation, Theodore Roosevelt, who would become US President in 1901, responded personally to Riis, "I have read your book and I have come to help you." The book's success made Riis famous, and How the Other Half Lives stimulated the first significant New York legislation to curb tenements house problems. You can see the image of the photograph of a New York City tenement by Jacob Riis, published in 1888. Another picture you can see of Baby in the Slum, taken in the year 1888-89. Riis' work became an important prototype to the exposure journalism that took shape in the United States after 1900. We also see in 1901 Tenement Housing Act, which happened following these observations. This act enforced all tenement houses constructed after the law to cut lot coverage to 70% on the interior lots and 90% on the corner lots, mandated separate bath for each apartment, inner court or rear yards for light and ventilation, improved fire safety measures. All tenements erected thereafter exceeding 60 feet in height should be fireproof. At least one window of the specified dimension required for every room, including the bathroom. Minimum size of rooms, requirements for running water and water closets in each apartment in new tenement houses. We also see permits before occupying the house. We also look at prohibited use of any part of the building as a house of prostitution, set up Tenements Housing Commission with a staff of inspection and enforcement powers. We also saw critical role of railroad in mobility and changing the urban pattern, and we also see its role during the Civil War from 1852 to 1863. We all see reflection and translation of life in industrial city by Charles Dickens, life of courageous, needy and polluted environment in the industrial city. Dickens also captured the boiling class, cultural and political tensions of the time in his release Hard Times in 1854. We also saw that this was also a time of large scale and top down urban planning. Leaders were struggling with how to adapt to industry and manage the huge growth pressures that the cities were facing. We saw Haussman redevelopment of Paris in 1870s, leading to movement of beautify the city, making it aesthetically appealing majorly to the upper class, resulting into scattering the poor and working class and dramatic remake of the city with facade design, boulevards, parks and promenades. We also see the Chicago World Fair 1893. The fair brought life to the City Beautiful movement. The area around the fair was called the White City for its white stucco buildings and its streets with electric lights. The buildings and lush landscaping made a mark, and city planners began to look for ways to bring open space and beautiful public buildings into crowded cities. Chicago was one of the first cities to join the City Beautiful movement and was followed by others, including Washington, D.C., where the National Mall was created as part of the movement. Huge investments in public infrastructure took place from the Victorian era into the early 20th century. Utility systems giving access to electricity, gas and water for the first time, lighting, telegraph and telephone networks and railways. In the 20th century, we witness again transformation in our approach and perspective with new inventions like commuter train, the car and the airplane. They changed the urban form and also the global urban economy. We see changes in the global leading cities and also how they functioned. New technologies such as the car and the airplane would further expand our boundaries and reach. In big cities, people could live in one place and work in the other with improved connectivity. These interventions redefined our cities. We are looking at the image of tram in Chennai. Kolkata also witnessed its initial trams being driven by horses. The tram cars were imported from England. Calcutta was the first city in Asia to get the electric tram. The service began in 1902 between Esplanade and Kedarpur. Looking at Bombay, the trams were the first modern means of conveyance within the Bombay city and served for almost 75 years. The first tram service started in Bombay in May 1874 after Bombay Tramway Company Limited got the license to begin its operation. The earlier tram were horse-driven, and due to the expensive rates, these didn't receive a positive response from the residents of Bombay. The company soon closed the horse-driven system. In 1907, Bombay Electrical Supply and Tramways Company BEST purchased Bombay Tramway Company Limited, and Bombay City received its first electric tram. People welcomed the electric tram with much pomp and enthusiasm. Delhi was the last city in India to reap the benefit of tram services. The tram service in Delhi began on 3rd June 1908. Metropolitan transit systems were another innovations of the time. London's Metropolitan Railway, sometimes known as the Underground, was the earliest and largest comprehensive metropolitan rail network, already very extensive by 1908, as shown in the picture. Likewise, we see for New York and Paris. We are looking at the picture of Western Railway local train service in Mumbai. On 12th April 1867, one train ran in each direction having 4 bogies. From 1870 onwards, the train service was increased to 5 trains a day each way. Later, the train service was restricted to a single round trip departure from Virar at 6:45 a.m. and back journey from Back Bay at 5:30 p.m. The time took to travel between Virar and Back Bay was less than the Churchgate Virar local takes today, since there weren't few stations in between. On June 10, 1869, monthly and quarterly seasonal tickets were introduced on the BB&CI railway up to Bandra for first and second class commuters. The fare of the first local train service, second class, was 7 paisa per mile, third class fare was 3 paisa per mile, and the train had 3 classes: an exclusive coach for women in the second class section and separate smoking zone. We saw that zoning was another innovation of this time period. New York used separation of land use, industrial, residential, commercial, and so on, for both efficient urban growth and to maintain real estate values and also for the purpose of public health. We also see Kolkata map of 1907, which shows the variation in the land use. We see top cities of the time, the financial and the capital cities of Europe and North America, and also see cities emerging in Eastern context, and these cities were competing with each other, like London, New York, Paris, Berlin, Chicago, Vienna, Tokyo. If we visualize Mumbai city at this time, it had 7 lakh population, and we see emergence of suburb following the Mumbai plague. We also see that Kolkata was one of the largest city of the time with nearly 15 lakh population. Mass mobilization of the humans and huge pressure on housing, infrastructure and services can be witnessed here. We are looking at the image of Mumbai in the same period. You may see the level of migration and increasing population in the city. We are now looking at the image of Kolkata in the same period. You may see the level of increasing population in the city and the pressure on the infrastructure. In the 20th century, we see strong opposing ideas on cities based on new technologies and social, political, economic and cultural context. Ebenezer Howard's Garden City of Tomorrows in 1902 was one such idea of decentralizing cities into self-sustaining communities known as garden cities. This is still influencing concept. In this image, we see Letchworth Garden City in UK, which was Ebenezer Howard's prototype. In the image, you can see Redburn in New Jersey, another example of American garden suburb. If we compare at the same time, Mumbai suburban district consists of 3 talukas, namely Andheri, Borivali and Kurla. In the image, we see Andheri station in 1940s. We saw new concepts and aspirations coming out because of the stress of urban life, garden city, completely self-sustaining cities and the city beautiful movement. At this time, living in cities was seen crowded, dirty, unhealthy and unsafe. We see the concept of suburban, which became popular among the elites, where people could work in the city and leave the city after their work. First we saw train suburb, later we also see car suburb. The idea was to integrate the urban to the green and reduce the difference between the rural and the urban life. New Jersey is one example and Los Angeles another, and these suburban were exclusive for the upper class. You are looking at the example of streetcar suburban in Charlotte and St. Francis Wood in San Francisco. These suburbs were also exclusionary. As you can see in the given deed, some people were allowed and some were not allowed. We see similarly suburb formation in Greater Mumbai. This was also a result of interventions of Bombay City Improvement Trust formed after Mumbai plague of 1896. The suburbs were not for the elite in contrast to what we see in the western landscape. Because the cities were getting overcrowded and following the Garden City movement by Ebenezer Howard, decentralization and integration with green was targeted. We see implication of this in planning legislation too, where regional planning was emphasized for changing the relationship between rural and the urban. The official birth of planning as a practice and in a field of study is one of these new innovations of this period. Meanwhile, political shifts gave rise to increasing instability as the status quo gives way to global war and revolution presenting huge issues for cities. Millions of people moved to cities in the 19th century to be closer to the opportunities and to each other. As a response to this, the idea of suburb grew out of a desire to merge the city with the gardens and to bring urban living closer to the rural. Ebenezer Howard led the Garden Cities movement, which was called for new cities created away from the dense urban cores, with bucolic gardens aspect in the design and the layout. Trains and streetcars had made it much easier and faster for suburbs to develop, and suburban living became popular among the urban upper class. Meanwhile, the American innovations of the personal automobile gave rise to a whole new class of suburbs designed around the car. These suburbs had one thing in common, and that was their exclusivity. They were designed and envisioned to include some but not all urbanites. Further, we see in the early 20th century three movements in particular which saw the convergence of architecture, design, planning, art, sociology and politics were hugely transformative from the 19th through 1930s. Frank Lloyd Wright and his prairie style, Le-Corbusier and his vision for modern cities, and Bauhaus school which saw philosophy, art, architecture, design and urban planning converge in Germany and beyond. We also see Walter Benjamin with his different approach to urban planning in Europe. He took field notes while exploring the cities. Now we look at the three key philosophies in the period. Frank Lloyd Wright brought the prairie style. Prairie means a very large area of flat land covered in grass with few trees. We are looking at the sketch of Broadacre. Decentralization and spaces was very important. Every family having 1 acre. It was not transit oriented. Each family would have lot to grow their own food. The plan was for car-oriented cities. At that time, person with car was transformative and was considered to be new liberating technology. We are looking at the city of Canberra in Australia. Le-Corbusier had vision for modern city. Le-Corbusier developed a theory of city planning in the 1920-21, which has been very influential throughout the century. The most striking element of Le-Corbusier approach was its high rise, high density, strict adherence to geometric form, regularity and standardization, and utilitarian structures. Each element in the city had a defined location. He called towers in the park, high rise, high density living alongside highways and parklands, as you may also see in the plan of Chandigarh. In this image, we see example of Brasilia designed by architect Oscar Niemeyer based on Le-Corbusier principles. Both Frank Lloyd Wright and Le-Corbusier's influence can be seen in cities around the world and also in planning practice today. In 1920s, Weimar, Germany, the Bauhaus school incorporated utopian and social principles into a new vision for modern design that eliminated hierarchies between spaces and emphasized the utilitarian rather than magnificent structures. We can see the example from Tel Aviv and Singapore here. Bauhaus, who integrated philosophy, art, architecture, design and urban planning in Germany and outside, eliminated hierarchies between the spaces and focused on the utility than the grandeurs. Clean lines, not the elevations and no angles, semicircles were very influential. Frank Lloyd Wright and his vernacular prairie style, bringing a combination of Japanese influence and American prairie to apply in the design of broad acres, the vision of a city, but also in really applied examples like Canberra, Australia. Further, we see there was a train station of a few office and apartment building in Broadacre city, but the apartment dwellers are expected to be a small minority. All important transport is done by automobile, and the pedestrian can exit safely only within the confines of 1 acre, 4,000 square meter plot where most of the population dwells. This was the period in which planning was formalized into a discipline. study and profession with realization that coherent school was necessary. Until this period, there was no city department and the domain was seen by architects, designers, sociologists and politicians. Planning domain was perceived bringing together ideas, practice and philosophies, and planning entity was created with new powers and responsibility. This was one of the key innovations of the early century. From the first planning bodies in cities like New York and London, we see the origin of comprehensive plan and the general plan. Planners now had new powers and great responsibility to remake cities and urban life. You are looking at the first comprehensive plan for San Francisco by Burnham. We see Robert Moses as first planner, who has enormous power and access to resources and created new roads and highway. The first academic department of planning came in Harvard University in 1923. In 1920-1930, Chicago School, the urban sociologist Robert Park and Louis Wirth built an urban sociology school. They introduced the tradition of urban ethnography, covering mapping, narratives of social decline, social organizations. Chicago at that time had different neighborhoods and it was very appropriate for them to have such a school. Meanwhile, in India, Patrick Geddes has started 3 years course in sociology in University of Bombay. Geddes had been lecturing, holding summer schools and workshops at colleges and universities in Lucknow, Kolkata, Bombay and Darjeeling on subjects like regional survey, town planning, nature study, social evolution and others. Geddes offered lectures and discussions and every Saturday was devoted to excursions to various parts of Bombay and neighborhood villages. In this period, we further see that it was a period of dreams, nightmare, escape and reality. This was the time of Great Depression and mass migration. The trend came to escape and look at the future and not the past. You see imaginary and beautiful cities in Hollywood movies such as Wizard of Oz in 1939 and Lost Horizon in 1937. So this shows how people looked at escape from their real life where there was a lot of depression. These cities were different from the real world, giving community opportunity to escape. We also see the New York World's Fair in 1939, where world was looking towards the city of tomorrow. At the same time, looking at the Indian landscape, we have Devdas of 1936 in Bollywood address to prevalent caste system through the love story. The story was a critique on prevalent caste system. Devdas couldn't marry his childhood sweetheart Paro as she belonged to a lower caste. If Devdas talked about disparity between the classes, then Achyut Kanya went a step further and tackled untouchability, which was a curse during those days and is still rampant in our social fabric. This can be termed as Bombay Talkies' most successful film and earned for its protagonist Ashok Kumar the tag of superstar. The die for the savvy urban hero was cast and Ashok Kumar's urban elegance serves as the model to the date. In the movie Kismet, as we had seen, the difference of class and caste was just not about the Indian landscape. We see that it prevailed even in the Western landscape. There was division among the racial or ethnic, class-based ethnic and even differences between the ideologies. The projects were happening at the large scale and therefore planners had a lot of powers in hand to guide the present and the future of the communities. So now we look at where did we go wrong in the planning interventions. We can see here that the red lining map of Los Angeles and the vicinity, the green indicate which places were good for investment and red indicates the places not considered good for the investment. Such interventions had multi-generational impact. We see similar divisions in other parts of the world took place like South Africa and the division was also part of the law. At this period, we are at the gates of World War II. We will end here and continue to reflect our interventions approach in urban landscape from diverse perspectives. So, summarizing in today's session, we saw the industrial period and how people from different disciplines deciphered cities. We looked at key work and observations of Charles Dicken, John Snow, Charles Booth, Jacob Riis, Haussman, and we also looked at the resulting urban reforms which took place after that. We looked at the key movement and theories about the city beautiful, garden cities and suburbs. We looked at the key interventions and investments in infrastructure and how they influenced our lives socially and economically. We looked at the key movement related with Frank Lloyd Wright, Le-Corbusier, Bauhaus school, and we also looked at Banjamin. We looked at the origin of planning discipline, and we also saw Patrick Giri's teaching in India. We reviewed the planning approach. We saw what kind of planning approach we were adopting and what was the social context in the Western world and what was the context in India. So that was the coverage for today. These are the references which were used. Our coverage was limited with the scope to make you aware of the topic. There are enormous readings and movies available to explore. Few are suggested here. This is not an extensive list. You may feel free to suggest more from your experience. Please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about your concerns you have. Do share your opinion, experiences, and suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you while exploring cities and urban planning. That's all for today. Thank you.